Welcome back to Something in the Wilderness, a podcast dedicated to all of Andrew McMahon's music. My name's Steve, and today I want to talk about a love song. Or maybe a song about a lost love. I'll let you decide. Next week's Valentine's Day, the day that some celebrate and some loathe. For new relationships, it can be a romantic day. For longer-term relationships, it might be just another day. For some single people, it just feels like an insult. But especially for the newly single, it can be downright painful. I know this is an Andrew McMahon podcast, but the song I'm talking about today wasn't written by Andrew. However, he did contribute a lot to it, and this song arguably wouldn't be the same song without him. There aren't too many Andrew songs that have two distinctly different versions recorded of about 10 years apart, and that inevitably comes with a share of fans who would prefer one over the other, or vice versa. I remember hearing the original version of this song as just one of those tracks I downloaded back in 2002, along with another mismatch of tracks after seeing the band play at Warped Tour. Now this one was an acoustic track, which wasn't surprising being that just about every pop-punk band of that era had at least one acoustic track, or ballad at least. What was surprising, though, is that as good as this song was, it didn't have a proper release for so many years after that. At the time, it was just one of those tracks I found online that didn't belong anywhere, or so I thought. But eventually it would be re-recorded as a full band ballad almost a decade later. Today's song is called Wait. The band is Something Corporate, and I found out much later that it was originally track 6, the second to last track on the unreleased Galaxy sessions, recorded in 2001. But even before that, it was part of a 4-track demo the band used to shop around to record labels. So we've talked recently about another song from that same unreleased collection, but unlike that other one, Wait was eventually reworked and had its proper release. While the original version is all acoustic, the re-recording was an entirely new full-band electric version featured on the Played in Space Greatest Hits comp, released on April 27th, 2010. The original acoustic version of this song is also included in the Live at the Ventura DVD show in 2004, which you can find on YouTube. I'll link that version in the show notes. Or you can just pull out your DVD if you have it, like I do. Since there are two distinctly different versions of Wait, the original from 2000-2001 and that re-recording I mentioned a decade later in 2010, this gives me a unique opportunity to talk about one song with essentially two different lives. I don't know exactly who produced the original because officially there's no listing for production credits out there, at least that I can find. Both of these collections, Galaxy Sessions and that demo, included an acoustic guitar-only version of the song. And I do know that Chuck Reed recorded some demos with Something Corporate early on before they had a record label, so I can only assume that this was one of them. In fact, he worked for Interscope Records at the time, so this kind of fits the history. Also, looking at the liner notes of Played in Space, it's Chuck Reed who's listed as the producer of the 2010 full band version. Now, Chuck Reed has been in the music business since 1980, and I know he formed a tight friendship with the band early on in their career. Andrews mentioned more recently that they remained friends with Chuck long after that, even though they opted not to sign with him in Interscope in 2001. So I am curious how that relationship came back around a decade later for him to produce just this one song for them in 2010. Jose Alcantor, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, recorded the track for them, and then the two of those guys mixed it together, according to the Played in Space liner notes. These same two guys, Chuck and Jose, also remixed Forget December to release in the same collection. I don't know, maybe it was the type of situation where since Chuck was there from the beginning of this song's life, maybe he was even there when they wrote it, that they felt like it was coming full circle to have him produce the new polished version in 2010. The details are vague in whatever I can gather, so this is just speculation. Chuck and Jose currently run Sankola Sound, a music production company. I left a link in the show notes for you. The credits on their website list their work with many other artists such as No Doubt, Sting, the All-American Rejects, and more. Both Something Corporate and Jack's Mannequin are also listed in their credits. But the only evidence I could find about their work with Jack's Mannequin is where Jose is listed as an additional engineer in the liner notes of Everything in Transit. But getting back to the song itself, Andrew had this to say to Spin magazine in April 2010, about 2 weeks before the release of Played in Space. We started playing Wait before being signed, and it was a song we had always talked about recording. Our goal was to go back to some of those tunes that we really love, that we never really brought back into the studio before, and Wait was definitely one of those. We started playing Wait before being signed, and it was a song we had always talked about recording. Our goal was to go back to some of those tunes that we really love, that we never really brought into the studio before, and Wait was definitely one of those. I know that Andrew performs the vocals in both versions, and I only hear one guitar on that entire acoustic version, so I have to assume that's Josh Partington's guitar in the original recording. But in some recordings I find of this track online, I hear a bass guitar in there as well. I'm not sure if the demo version and the Galaxy Sessions version were just a bit different, but I can hear the bass really clearly toward the end of the song in one version I found, but not in the other. Of course, that must have been Kevin Clutch Page on bass. The full band version is a little harder to tell who exactly was involved, though. I mean, I can make some assumptions. The band re-recorded 2 of their older songs for Played in Space, but there aren't any musicians listed in the liner notes like there had been on previous CDs. So we'll just assume that the musicians on this re-recording are the reunited lineup of Andrew, Josh, Bobby Raw, Kevin, and Brian Ireland, but I can't really say for sure. Many times when I'm looking at dates of old concerts, tours, festivals, or even more important newsworthy events, I try to trace back to where I was in my life at that time, like things like where I lived, who I was spending time with, what was important to me, that sort of thing. But without putting too much thought into it, I could be surprised that I wasn't even aware that Something Corporate reunited back in 2010 for some festivals and a short tour. But I really wasn't aware of when any of that happened. I was definitely following Jack's Mannequin at the time pretty closely. I know because I saw them in 2009 and in 2011, and I was collecting all the songs from the EPs Jack's Mannequin was putting out around this time on iTunes. But somehow I missed this whole Something Corporate reunion thing in between those and the final Jack's album. So let's see, where was I that year? Well, it was definitely a year of transition. See, back then my life was lived in school years. Apparently in the spring of 2010, Something Corporate reunited for 3 Bamboozle festivals. But I was just finishing up my unpaid school counseling internship 2 days a week at a local high school just outside of D.C. At the same time, I worked at Blockbuster Video 3 to 4 nights per week to help pay our rent, while my newlywed wife was teaching full-time. So when Something Corporate played that festival in New Jersey on May 1st, 2010, I was probably at Blockbuster that night. I was finishing up my final papers that week, and I would earn my master's degree later that month. We'd also recently learned that my wife was pregnant, and I was driving to Michigan and Ohio around that time, back and forth, interviewing for school counseling jobs. That was also probably the same month we broke the news to some of our closest friends that were moving away from Maryland and back to the Midwest. So even though one of those Something Corporate reunions was only 4 hours from my doorstep in New Jersey, it certainly wasn't even on my radar at the time. But ironically, I do want to point out that I did go to 2 concerts the first half of that year. For the reasons mentioned above, it was only 2. It was Sherwood and My Favorite Highway, 2 indie bands that I discovered on MySpace, both of which I would say have commonalities with Jack's Mannequin, and both of which I highly recommend. Those shows were both at the Jam and Java in Vienna, Virginia, if you're familiar with it. Very cool venue. Anyway, 2 months later, in July of 2010, my wife and I would pack everything we owned and move to Amish country in Ohio, with new jobs in an area where we knew nobody. I would start my first school counseling job on the 1st of August, right around the time that Something Corporate started their full reunion tour. So looking back at the tour dates, the closest they came to Central Ohio on that tour was Detroit, again, about 4 hours away from where I was now living. But of course, I had no idea they were even touring with what I had going on. They did play 2 shows in D.C. that month, one on my birthday, so I guess had we stayed living in Maryland, I might have actually gone to that show. Now, if that Something Corporate reunion happened now, I'd travel just about anywhere in the country to see the show. Then again, we do get a decent amount of Something Corporate material at any given wilderness show these days, but it would be really cool to see the original lineup again one day, and especially to hear Josh Partington's songs live again. I bring up the 2010 reunion shows here because that's when the majority of times Wait appeared in the set list, according to Setlist FM anyway. 6 times in 2003, 9 times in 2010, and just a couple in between. So based on what's documented, they played Wait at about half of the reunion tour shows. I will add here that I'm absolutely certain that they played Wait before 2003, but it seems like no one was documenting set lists online before that point. What I find really shocking, though, is how they played Wait at the reunion shows. I have found 5 recordings at different venues from that tour on YouTube, and they all have the same acoustic guitar-only version of that song. Remember, Something Corporate had just released Played in Space that year with this very different full band version of the song. Granted, maybe it would have been difficult to replicate that sound in concert from the album, and they were probably happy to take it back to the old days with an acoustic break in the middle of the set. But I still see this as a missed opportunity. As in, maybe it could have started acoustic to give the older fans a taste, but then led into the full band version to promote that new one. But so far as I know, the 2010 re-recorded style version has never been performed live. If you know any differently, please let me know. It is sad to me that Andrew, for the most part, will not perform Josh songs live. I don't know if this is something they've agreed to, or if there's something more to the story here, but when fans have requested Josh Partington songs while Andrew's performing, he's never honored that request, except for one time. You may have been lucky enough to catch Andrew's holiday livestream back in December 2021. He performed Forget December, which is Josh's song, and he gave Josh a shout out for writing such a great song. So I'm not sure what changed with that one, and I'm also unsure of why Andrew will play other artists' songs such as Casey Musgraves, Tom Petty, and more, but usually he won't play Josh Partington's songs. I understand it wouldn't be like singing his own lyrics, but neither is covering someone else's song. It'd be like a cover, right? I'll tell you what, though. The 2010 version of Wait is at the top of my list of Something Corporate songs to hear live, because as far as I know, it's never been done, and because I love it so much. Maybe one day the guys will reunite, and we'll hear it on stage, who knows? I mentioned earlier that you can catch the original acoustic version of the song live on the Live at the Ventura DVD, and that's the best recording you can find out there of it, so that's the one I'll link in the show notes. But again, if anyone listening has a recording of the band performing the full band version of the song, I'd love to hear and see it. Now, I know this song was written before Something Corporate was even signed. Though Andrew wrote most of the songs that Something Corporate recorded for their albums, this song is of course written by Josh Partington. As we know from the original version, he wrote it as an acoustic guitar track. In my opinion, the lyrics are some of the best that Josh has ever written. But then again, if you look at the lyrics for all the songs he's written, he's a pretty strong lyricist. In 2004, Josh and a group of his musician friends put together a book of poems they wrote titled Revolution on Canvas. Josh had 2 poems in that book, and they're pretty good. Other bands whose members also contributed to this book included RX Bandits, Finch, Taking Back Sunday, NoFX, and A Static Lullaby. By the way, I did finally give Josh Partington's other band's full album a listen recently. In fact, I liked it so much, I've listened to it several times now. Dancehall Apocalypse by his band Fire Escape is a heavier emo album that's reminiscent of a lot of the music from that scene in the mid-2000s. In fact, as I listened to this album, I was transported back to that time period. I wish I had seen them in concert when they existed. I think that would have been a great show. And now that I think about it, had I known that he was one of the primary songwriters in Something Corporate way back then, I would have known to follow his career more closely. But honestly, I didn't know any of the band members' names from Something Corporate until Jack's Mannequin existed. Anyway, you can hear similar guitar riffs on the Fire Escape album to what Josh was writing on the heavier songs of Something Corporate's North. Actually, my favorite takeaway from listening to Dancehall Apocalypse was that it gave me a sense of continuation of where some of Something Corporate's guitar went after North, and I really liked it. I won't try to tell you that Fire Escape sounds like Something Corporate, but the guitar work is familiar. If Andrew's vocals and piano were mixed into these songs, who knows what this could have become? But we'll never know, so let's just enjoy Fire Escape and Jack's Mannequin as 2 completely separate entities. So based on what I know about Andrew's age and timing of these original demos, Josh had to be a teenager when he wrote Wait. That impresses me just as much as it does when we talk about the songs Andrew wrote when he was a kid. Yeah, the original guitar riff is pretty simple, but the lyrics and the melody are really strong. When you listen to the full band version, the guitar line is more complex, in addition to everything else that's added to that song. I do wonder what the collaboration was like when they came together to record the song in 2010. Did the band members write their own parts, or did Josh have a say in what the other instruments would do in that full band version? I'm betting Andrew wrote the piano melody, but it is possible that Josh helped him develop it, I don't know. But I've always wondered how involved Josh was in the piano in all the songs that he wrote himself. Just like I wonder if Josh developed his own guitar for all the Andrew penned songs. I can only assume that's the case, though. It's not at all surprising to me, but the sound of the full band version sounds to me like a mid-era Jack's Mannequin song, which is exactly where we were in time when this was recorded. The only thing surprising is that this was supposed to be a Something Corporate song, but to me it doesn't sound like any other Something Corporate song that was ever done. I'm okay with that, but I just thought I'd point out that it sounds more like a Jack song than a Soko song to me. Comparing the 2 versions, the intros are so different, but I love them both. The acoustic version simply has that acoustic guitar, but in this case, something so little does so much. In the full band version, we get a short drum intro, then the piano melody that really elevates the song in my opinion. I also hear something like an organ or something else, like maybe one of those many instruments that was used on Everything in Transit. I can't identify it, but it always reminds me of the line from Billy Joel's Piano Man, and the piano sounds like a carnival. So maybe that'll give you a better sense of the sound I'm talking about here without hearing it. I do appreciate the minimalism of the acoustic version. For most of my listens to this version, I imagine just an acoustic guitar and Andrew's vocals. But in more recent listens, I've started to notice a bass guitar more toward the end, like I said earlier. I admit, I find it hard to pick up the bass in a song if it's not doing something very different from the guitar. I would say the best thing about the full band version, though, is the piano melody throughout the verses. I also love what the guitar does during those moments as well, and that's one of the reasons it reminds me of a Jack's Mannequin song. It does make me wonder if that's Bobby's guitar that's doing that. So here's a fun little experiment for you. Open up both of the YouTube links in the show notes in a separate browser and start playing both at the same time. I did have to adjust the time a little bit at the beginning, but if you sync it up just right, the pacing stays the same in both versions throughout the entire song. And especially when you get to the end of the bridge where things slow down for a moment, it's spot on. Try it with those linked videos, trust me, it's really cool. And now for the lyrics. I love the rhyming scheme used in the verses. These lines are so well written, and then Andrew's delivery is just perfect. I do want to go through the whole first verse because it includes my favorite lines of the song, and the teaming among Josh and Andrew of writing and performing is just right here. I can hear ticking clocks, running rampant in me, chiming in apogee, waiting for the synergy of her and me, waiting on the light. And I never say goodnight, never say that I'm always right. Now in you, girl, I'm content to drown. You're so high and I'm so down. This night'll end sooner, but much sooner now. I'm awake in you, and you're asleep in me. All the things I'll never be make me wonder, could you see? I love those lines. Then to the chorus. I want to point out here that I've never noticed this until I sat down to take notes on the lyrics of this song. I've enjoyed both versions of this song for years, but it never occurred to me until just a couple days ago that one of the main lines in the chorus is different. So I'll read through it and then point out which part. In the acoustic version, he sings, "Wait till I hit the ground harder. Wish I could wait to hear your heartbeat fast. Wish I could wait till I missed her flavor. My days are numbered here and I don't want to be the last one home." But in the full band version, instead of singing "till I missed her flavor," every time that line comes up, he instead sings, "if it keeps you safer." Definitely a more PG-rated line, and it changes the sentiment to something a little bit more romantic and not as lustful, I think. If I'm interpreting it the way you know I am. I could have lived with the old line and probably wouldn't even have thought of it, but "if it keeps you safer" definitely sounds sweeter and more caring. Also, the full band version drops one of the "wish I coulds" in the chorus. But somehow, again, if you listen to both versions simultaneously, the pacing remains exactly the same. The second verse is beautiful too, but not quite as good as the first in my opinion. Though I'm weak inside, I'm thriving just the same, still calling out your name, wondering who it is that I should blame. Stabbing hard and buried, consciousness and fear, forgetting others I hold dear, wondering maybe could you hear. But my favorite part of the song has got to be the bridge leading into the final chorus. I really like the entire bridge, but it's those final lines and notes of this piece that really makes me feel something more than the rest of the song does. The bridge, if you're not sure, is the part where he sings, "And I said, there you are, baby, just waiting on the sun, just staring at the sky, said, when will he be done? And I said, there you are, baby, waiting on the sun, staring at the sky." Then there's a tempo change in both versions at this moment, and this is the part I love. In the full band version, all the other instruments drop out except for the piano and the one guitar, saying, when will he be done? When will he be done? I wish I could wait till I see you shaking, wait to pull out of this one fast. Then the music picks back up in the full band version, and the drums lead the rest of the instruments back in to pick back up for the rest of the final chorus and the outro. That is such a powerful piece in both versions, but it just doesn't seem to have the same effect on me in the acoustic one as the full band one. Now don't get me wrong, I really liked the acoustic version of this song when I heard it almost 20 years ago, but I think the re-recorded version took this song to a whole new level. I much prefer the full band version, obviously. They took this song that had great lyrics and a beautiful melody and turned it into something that was so much more. And that's the version I fell in love with. I enjoy listening to both versions of this song, but when I say that Wait is one of my favorite Something Corporate songs of all time, and I do say that, it's the full band version I'm referring to. Wait was one of 2 original Something Corporate demos to get re-recorded years later, and I do look forward to talking about another one of these with a guest later this year. But I truly wish that all these older demos that were never officially released could get a new life just like Wait did. Because there truly are some gems from that era. Like, how about a full band re-recording of Ben Franklin's Kite, or When It Goes Down? You old school fans know what I'm talking about. When I first heard the acoustic version of Wait all those years ago, the song honestly just fell into the pile of me for good, heartbreaking pre-leaving through the windows tracks. So I hope you don't mind that I pulled this one out for Valentine's Day. Even though it's probably more of a song about pining for lost love, the lyrics are really emo, right? The re-recording gave this song a whole new life for me, though. All the best pieces from the original, including the lyrics and the guitar line are there, but with the addition of these other instruments, namely that piano melody that I mentioned, proving once again the Andrew and Josh writing team were a force to be reckoned with, and I'm really curious as to what they'd come up with if they were to write together again. I don't think it would sound like old something corporate. I think it would sound like something entirely new, which could be a good case for why never to call it something corporate again if they decide to record together. I know that's a controversial statement to make, but I just don't think something corporate would be something corporate again. I know that Andrew has stated on more than one occasion that the band would probably never record another album together, but they're still good friends, so the possibility of them reuniting for shows here and there does exist, and I'm good with that, because they've all moved on, they're all very different people and musicians than they were 20 years ago. I mean, look at what a decade did to one of these original songs. Sure, in my opinion, it became even better, but it's so different. Thanks again for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and share the show with other Andrew fans. Remember that you can rate shows on Spotify and Apple, so if you haven't already, please help out and do that. I'm always seeking guests, so if you want to discuss one of these songs with me, reach out via Instagram or by emailing somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com. I'll close with an emo line by a great emo songwriter. My days are numbered here, and I don't want to be the last one home.